Hi everyone, I am so excited because I am speaking with author Jeff Sweat and we are talking about his debut novel called Mayfly, and he has it right in front of him. And this is it's a YA, right? I mean, it's YA, thriller, science, sci-fi. It's like a whole bunch of genres all in one. And you know what, Jeff? That's not even like sci-fi is so not my thing. Like it's
hmm
not like it's out of my element, but this book was so good. And I love when I do get into one because I almost have to be forced because I'm like to transcend the I don't know, to go to the future like that is like it takes so much for me to get there. So that's like the hugest compliment that I can give you right there. So
It's actually pretty amazing, and thank you. I actually do hear that from people who say, "Well, not my genre, but I once I started reading it, like I haven't stopped thinking about it, and I think that's pretty cool." My dad, who does not like sci-fi at all, had to be kind of like forced to read this, and he did read it, and he said,
oh,
okay, I didn't think I was gonna like it, but I loved it. So I and that's not as easy a compliment as I make that sound to get from him for sure.
well, you know what? I went against all my rules, and I was doing my research this morning before we talked, and I found an interview that you did, and I never listen I don't want to listen to interviews, right? So I was like, I'm just going to listen to the very beginning when they introduce you, and I didn't stop. It was an hour long, and I listened to the entire thing, and I was like, oh, why did I do that? But I couldn't stop listening to
Oh,
you and this guy talking, and it was so interesting. And I was like hooked. I couldn't like press stop. So I.
oh, great. It's so nice to hear.
Yeah, so I feel like
Thanks.
I know so much, but then it led to like, oh, we have so much more to talk about than I even thought we had to talk about. And, it's crazy because you are one of 8 children. I have 6 children. Okay.
Wow, yeah, I
Yeah,
saw that. That's amazing.
yeah. And I was listening to you talk about like growing up in a big family. And I always like my children are now growing up. My oldest is 31. And
Mhm.
I think that, and you can answer this question for me, but as I watch them and their relationships change as they get older, it's really interesting to me because there's a big age gap and they're kind of spaced, and like watching them become adults and then have different relationships. You know how you're in the middle, I heard, but the
Yeah,
older kids kind of take over, and they think they can boss you around.
yeah,
And then watching my younger children kind of being like, wait, can they still, like, I'm 20, can they still do
yeah,
that?
yeah. I'm told that I may be the bossy one in my family, and I think
Oh,
it's sort of like the being situated in the middle. I don't know. I kind of have little sway either way. I'm not quite sure, or maybe I just am way more opinionated than my siblings, which is probably also true. What I find interesting is as kids get older, this kind of constant renegotiation of the relationships you had, because I think you kind of come into it with like I'm the little brother or I'm the big sister kind
yes.
of thing, and I really do think that you have to kind of figure out what make find an equilibrium that works for you as adults, because that's the only way you're ever going to relate. So we go through this all the time with us, but we love hanging out. It's always the most fun part of any reunion is when we get to the siblings all kind of like sneak off toward the end of the night, and we'll go play. We have this thing which traditionally we play like a midnight ultimate frisbee, which sounds really weird,
Ooh.
but we'll go out at midnight and we'll play. It's fun. I feel like we're teenagers again. It's really cool.
Well, I saw on one of my children's phones, they had like a group and a
Mhm.
message thing going. And I was like, why aren't I in that group? And he's like, because we talk about you. I'm like, oh, I like
Yeah.
raised a group of people that talk about me now.
Well, that's what we get, right? As parents.
Yeah. I was like,
Okay.
oh, I can't be in that. All right. And as parents, we don't feel as much older as they see us. Like it's almost like that. My 31-year-old son, I'm 54. I feel like we're like I don't know. It's weird. It's like he has 3 kids and I'm like, "Wait, but we're that whole thing just changes cuz
Yeah,
it's crazy."
that's amazing.
It is. It is. But so I listened to you talk about this book like so I'm like I'm trying to separate out the questions that I had for you, okay?
Yeah.
And so what I always want to ask a writer like you who's making up a world, okay? And it's kind of like the Harry Potter thing, and I think they used to ask J.K. Rowling the same question is that, you have to recreate a world and
Mm-hmm.
then you have to we have to buy into it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that to me, I'm like, how do you sleep at night? Like, are you sitting like I'm just imagining your dreams like when you're creating another world, like. And I loved, okay, there's so many things I loved about your world was because I've lived in California, I've lived in LA, and I love how like LA, like the one group is L,
Yeah.
and it took me a while,
Yeah.
Jeff, okay. I had to say it a couple of times. I'm like, wait, LA.
Yeah, I thought that was a lot of fun for that same reason. People always kind of do a little bit of a double take about halfway through, and they're like, "Are we talking about LA?"
Are we talking
Even though
about
that's
LA, Hollywood, and L? Yeah, okay, we're doing. So you took something familiar, but you put it in the future. So you had to create this place. So take me to that. Take me when you initially thinking like, this is what I'm gonna do, how I'm going to do
yeah.
it.
So it started with this concept of that Mayfly is this world where all the adults died about 100 years before, and the kids that remain only live to be about 17. So I started thinking about how people would have survived and how that would dictate the way society evolved from there. And that was kind of the very first thing I did. So I kind of looked at, for example, in of our heroes, the tribe they're in, the Angelinos, it's really a mixture of all the people who survived in LA in that area, and I deliberately made them typically kind of first or second generation immigrants, because I felt like they would have a better chance of surviving because of the stronger sense of community, because they work with their parents, that kind of thing, and so as a result, the people who formed the Hollywood are a mixture of Latinos, Asians, and whites, probably in that ratio. So first of all, the language changes, right? The culture changes.
Right.
They sort of like all of their belief systems start coming together. So they worship 3 gods. One of them is Buddha, one of them is Jesucristo, and the other one is TV, because they figured TV must have felt like a god to them, this thing that could feed everybody everywhere. And so I think I actually did approach it almost from a anthropological sense of just identifying the characteristics that made these people who they are and how those would manifest themselves 100 years later. And a lot of it was really cool. This world is largely post-racial.
Mm-hmm.
This society here in LA is matriarchal. So that, I can't say it matriarchal, but the girls run it, and if the boys cause problems,
Love
they
that.
literally come out. And so part of, I would say, a huge part of this world is driven by human behavior and what makes it survive, and then how that manifests itself. And then the other part was, I love LA, and so I was kind of thinking of places where I would want to set this, and I wanted it to be someplace warm so they could live year round and not have to worry too much about freezing and things like that, because it would make it really difficult as kids to deal through like a long winter in the north. And for a while I thought of like Florida, and I thought, why am I talking about Florida when I have literally the city in my own backyard, the city that I love? And so for me, half the fun was, frankly, picking these landmarks that are so important to me, that for me are kind of, as an Angelino, are things that I love, and then just sort of like trying to see them through completely different eyes, because kids wouldn't understand why we have a building like the observatory here in Los Angeles, or why we have the Capitol Records building or Hollywood Bowl. They only know kind of how they use it now, which has changed dramatically. So for me, it was kind of like trying to go through. I actually went to all of those places. I looked at them really closely. I would sort of say, okay, well, how would this change in this world? And so the observatory is a sort of like half cathedral, half fortress. Disneyland has been taken over by one tribe of kids and has been turned into like this huge fortress where they raise cattle and they have like this sort of like almost like Knights of the Round Table kind of vibe to them, called the Kingdom. So it's just really, yeah, it's kind of like how would this stuff change? And sometimes what's the weirdest possible way I can bring things together? And that's typically kind of where that starts.
Yeah, it was fascinating to me because I do try, every book I read, and I read a lot of books, I try to get in the head of the author. I always try to like, how did they do that, or what were they thinking of? But I think that's why sci-fi and this kind of writing is so, because I'm like, I have no idea. I have absolutely no idea. Does it start with like pictures and notebooks and just like drawings and to come up with these different characters and to come up with the world that you're putting them in, and that's how I envision it.
On a note, I will say one thing that always happens is that there's frankly more in my head than there actually is in the book. And sometimes I forget that as an author and say, well, and I'll just sort of assume that people knew that. And I realize I didn't write it down anywhere. That's just stuff that I know. And then so we had the first round of edits with my editor was kind of a constant thing saying, well, why did they do this? And I said, oh, well, because of this and this and this. And I know it because that's the way I approached it. But I didn't, I didn't bother to put it all in. And so that was a really good learning for me, is if you figured out this world, put it in your book. So.
That's right. Well, I mean, I see everybody on Amazon. Like, I got to the end and I was like, okay, well, where's the sequel? Like, this came out last May. Hopefully he's writing the sequel. And then I went on Amazon and everybody's saying the same thing, which is, as a writer, I mean, I can't, as a debut novelist, like, that must just make you so happy that people are saying that.
It does. It does. I think I've had people clamoring to be beta readers, which, by the way, for your audience, if they like this kind of thing, feel free to reach out. I'm always looking for beta readers. But I did just finish the sequel, Scorpion. I just finished the second draft of it. It's off to my editor. We'll see how it goes. I personally really love it. It goes in a slightly different direction, kind of leans more into the science of this world, which is all there as an underpinning. And in this book, it becomes much more overt. Like they're really kind of exploring it. It's also, I think, a lot more personal. The characters, the things they're going through are pretty real. They all sort of feel like they are fundamentally broken in some way, that there's some kind of piece of them missing. So a big part of this book is not just about the action, but how do they put those pieces back together, which is something as readers, we like. As a writer, it was really important. It was certainly therapeutic in some cases, but also, it was also really a little bit painful because in order to write things, you have to feel them first. And so as I was writing, especially the last, few chapters of this book, there were times when I was crying so hard I couldn't even see the keyboard or the screen. I was sort of like touch typing, while I'm trying to like get my breath back, and I would stop at the end of the day and I would just, my wife would try to have a conversation with me and I would just say, can we give me like an hour before I have to talk to anyone? And so it was a pretty amazing process, something that was really personal and really cool. And hope that I have more of those types of experiences as I write.
Yeah, you know what? It reminded me of the Maze Runner. Word. I mean, the similarities of the children kind of bonding together and figuring out like who to trust and who not to trust, and that whole thing, and which I loved the Maze Runner. So I was like, okay, so has anybody bought the rights?
We're actually working on that right now. So we've been shopping around for a while. I have some agents at CAA who are looking at it, but actually I have a friend of mine who has put together a bunch of movies and TV packages, and we're looking pretty seriously about it. In fact, actually, we're supposed to meet this week. So I think it will turn into something at some point. I think it's such a cool world, and I've had enough interest in it that I think it will happen. It's Hollywood, so who knows when, if, why, or how.
Right.
Maybe it look totally different than what it looks like right now, but I do think that it's a real possibility.
Especially with
Uh,
all the avenues, like it doesn't necessarily have to be, big screen. You've got Netflix, you got Amazon. There's so many possibilities of, people now making movies, which I love because for authors, they're constantly buying up books now. And because I feel like teens like love this kind of movie. Like I feel like it really hits that demographic. If you get outside of their little Marvel world, you can go to this world and
I think so too, and I do think it will cross over really well to. It crosses over real to an adult audience.
oh
In fact,
yes.
actually, the biggest fans are adults.
I saw that.
Uh,
I saw that on
yeah.
Amazon. There were a lot of adults, and I think like I'm one of those weird people that love YA, as
Mhm.
an adult. And then I'm thinking, I think most people just don't admit it. They don't admit that they like YA.
No, I agree. I agree. I feel like it's a lot of people said, "Well, I don't really read that," and I said, "Well, it doesn't matter. You'll
Yes.
like this," and they did. It's cool. The way I describe this book um, is sort of Lord of the Flies meets Mad Max with a little Goonies
Mm,
thrown in. Sort of how I like to think of it. Kind of
yes.
got the little, like misfit kids who are trying to,
Yeah.
you know, quest that's larger than they are. In this world where everything's just kind of breaking down. It's on its last legs, and they're trying to figure out how to make a living, and kind of like how to survive in this bizarre world.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, there's one more thing I want to talk about. And
Sure.
because I was listening to that interview and I found this so interesting and it was made me happy that I did listen to the whole thing. Was this concept that you're coming up with at the end of the interview? You were talking about like how to get children to read more. And it's something like, because I'm a homeschooling mom, okay? I pushed reading with my children, but then watching them grow up, it's interesting to me to see which ones turned out to be readers because
Right.
I forced them to read, like as their school teacher, I forced them to read. But it is interesting, and they kind of go through stages. But now it's even getting more. I feel like it's getting more difficult because there's more. Video games are more that more so. It's all growing, and then on their phones, and it's a concern of mine because I always pushed reading. Like I always
Yeah.
thought, no, you need to read a book. Like, get outside of yourself, put your phone down, put your, computer down and just read and allow yourself that comfort, of transcending, like into a book. So I want you to
Yeah.
tell me about, because I think this is such a cool concept. I love it.
Well, it does start from a pretty real insight from my own children that it's increasingly hard to get them to read. I have three kids.
Hmm.
Various times they've all been pretty big readers. At this point, I would say none of them are, and it's more not because they stopped liking books, but because there's so many other things that are bidding for their
Right.
attention.
Yes.
In fact, to the point when Mayfly came out, it took an embarrassingly long time for my older two kids to read it, and a lot of frankly like sort of guilt trips and blackmail and things like that, and once they did, they loved it. But like, the reality is as authors, we are not competing against other books for
Right.
for eyes. We are competing against everything else in our kids' lives. And I would say, and not just kids, adults too. And
Yep.
so one of the things we wanted to experiment with is how can we bring this book to life in other ways that will draw them in. And so we're about to launch, and the date's still a little fuzzy because we're trying to get a few things finished. But we're about to launch this kind of interactive scavenger hunt to kind of simplify it, called Mayfly Quest. And Mayfly Quest basically brings this world to life, like in some ways, in very literal ways. So, for example, in the book, the Hollywood Bowl has been turned into this mass graveyard where they bury the people who died in this huge plague, and it's this taboo place. Its meaning is totally changed for our kids. So instead of just sort of talking about that, we actually went out and shot these like 360 VR images of the Hollywood Bowl, just like you would see like on someone uploads on Google Maps, that kind of thing. And then we brought in a film compositor to actually create these post-apocalyptic versions of those places. And so you can actually see it the way that our characters see it, with like things decomposing and in that case, like bodies piled up in aisles and stuff like that. And it's a lot of fun. Like you get to experience the world kind of as it happens. The other thing we did, which I think are really cool, was we created these really sort of like emergency distress signals, these radio signals that were playing at the time this plague happened. And it starts from pretty casual, like first responders meet at the Hollywood Bowl. And as society breaks down, they get more and more panicked. And by the end, it's kind of the message is more prepare your kids for what's next, make sure they know how to defend themselves, and to make sure they know how to feed themselves, show them where the medicine is, all this kind of stuff. And it was sort of this very honestly kind of tragic kind of thing where they're trying to just hand off the world to their children and make sure the kids have the best possible chance of surviving because they know the adults aren't going to make it at this point. So we show all those kinds of things, and then we every one of the clues that we put out there has a code in it, a simple code, and you go to mayflybook.com and you enter that code. And when you do that, you're rewarded with all sorts of things. And that can be bonus scenes, and deleted scenes. There's a short story that I'm working on for a prequel. There's a chapter of the next book, so you can see what happens in book 2. So there's like a lot of things for people who are into that. The other thing we did is because we did want to go to where kids actually were, we actually partnered with some local libraries to give them what we call a gatherer's bag, which is the name of the bag that our main character carries around. And it has all these clues in there, these physical clues that they can track down and sort of put together as a puzzle. And we worked with both libraries and indie bookstores. The idea of let's try to get this in front of kids in the places where ideally they are, and maybe they're there after school because the mom can't pick them up yet, so we're trying to figure out lots of ways in. We're specifically working with libraries where where the kids are more likely to be disadvantaged, because we want to make sure that those kids particularly have a chance to get part of this. And we're focusing primarily on LA because we know that the kids hopefully will look around the world around them and see, something familiar and cool, as they're kind of uncovering this world.
I just love that because I was thinking it's a great concept that could possibly even grow bigger than this, is to get the kids involved. Because I don't want to be the last generation of readers.
Yeah, me neither.
I just don't. I don't want to see a world where there's no readers because they're doing other things. And, because I'm that passionate that reading develops certain parts of your brain. And, I truly believe that. And, so I think this concept of trying to get the kids interactive, where it's like they want to go read to figure out, other things, or, put it on Snapchat or, wherever they are, which I don't know anymore. Every time I know social media, I don't,
Are ones that you can get through Snapchat, because it's true. They're not in the same place as we are, they're not on Facebook anymore. Right. They're doing lots of things. So we try to put it kind of speak in the language that makes sense. But it's also the kind of thing where I think it's something that it's not just for kids. It's for people who love sci-fi and have always wanted to live in the worlds that these created. It's for people who just sort of want to see a book brought to life, which is a pretty universal thing for all of us. We have our own images in our head, and then we want to say, okay, well, what did they think it looked like? Compare notes and kind of check it out.
Yeah, kind of like Comic-Con too. Could be
yeah, exactly.
That's
what we're hoping.
Well, you know what? You keep me in touch with this stuff, because I'd love to help you in any way.
Okay.
I don't know, to whatever capacity, but it's just when I was listening to you talk about it before, I was like, oh, that is so awesome, because I'm all for trying to get that next generation reading, and and I'm so happy that you're involved in that.
Yeah, no, I would love to. We are partnering with various influencers in the book space to help them kind of seed the contest or the hunt.
Yeah.
So I'd love your help. I'm gonna take you up on that.
Okay, so awesome. All right, show us the cover one more time. because we have just been chatting away, and I just want to show, because I do love this cover. They did an amazing job for you. It's
Oh
perfect.
yeah,
The
it's
covers are beautiful. It's haunting, yet it's just it catches your eye. You know.
what I love is this is they didn't actually realize this when they were pulling it together. They wanted more of the feeling of it, and so that image is actually of the LA River.
Yeah.
And specifically, this is for those who live in LA or watch movies, this is the Sixth Street Bridge, which is where the drag race scene in Greece happened, and like all of these
Yes.
like pretty iconic movie scenes all set there. So for me to have that on my book was really special because it's also kind of a nice Easter egg. You don't know it until you know it. So
Well, you know what? I'll be a beta reader for you for your next book too. I love
great,
doing that, and then
love,
we can talk
yeah,
before the publish, before your date comes out. So anyway, thank you so much, and I know we'll be in touch. And
great.
I will put all of Jeff's links listed below. I'm going to put the IndieBound link. I'm going to put the Amazon link because everybody's loving IndieBound links now. Because you can go to your local bookstore, support your local bookstore, and then Amazon if you want it on your Kindle today, you can do that. So.
Well, thank you, and thanks for everyone watching. I really appreciate it.
Yes, and
So,
we'll talk soon, Jeff. Thank you.
thank you so much. I really
Okay.
enjoyed this. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.